This is the Team Objection Podcast for December 27th, 2022, episode 557. If you've been on this month-long journey with us, welcome. It's time for us to name our top 5 video games of all time, updating our list from 10 years ago. Again, if somehow you've stumbled on this episode independently, we've been counting down the entire month, so go check out the last 3 episodes because there's some really quality stuff in there. There was beef, there was friendship, there was Sean's tacit approval of Dave, which shocked everybody to a certain extent.
More than once, even.
Yeah.
First time it's ever happened in history of this show. 557 episodes.
Dave said it, though. It's because we were all in a good mood because we're talking about these great games. Mm-hmm. And it's true. I had lots of endorphins. Now the endorphins are gone. I hate life again. So we're going to see if more combative Sean comes out.
We'll be going 5-1 today. So we'll reveal number 1 last because that's how you should do it. It's good content. We'll also do a little bit afterwards just as far as overall impressions, things that maybe could have been higher or lower, how we thought about how the list turned out as a whole. We'll get into some of that at the end. But for the time being, we might as well just jump in because, again, if you've been watching the last 3 weeks, you know what we're doing. It's not new to you. So we might as well just start with our number 5. I don't know which of these to switch first, so we're just going to do both. I don't know. Do that. Oh, that'll cover it while I switch. Oh, that's so smart. Oh, that's so seamless. Number 5 is Mass Effect 2. 7 votes. Everything in the top 5 has at least 6. 7 votes, 473 points. And I have to confess something in advance before we talk about Mass Effect 2 itself. Jason voted the entire trilogy as his number 1. I'm not saying this to put him on the spot. In some ways, I kind of agree with him. And now you could argue that the Legendary Edition is one video game. Again, we didn't combine games in that way because you could do like all 9 Kingdom Hearts in one game now, and that would count. So we're not doing it that way. So when I looked at how to apply this, Mass Effect 2 was our number 4 game last time. It's number 5 here. I gave Mass Effect 2 all of its points. Mass Effect 3 would not have made the top 25 if it had gotten a first place vote. It would have risen above 55th where it finished, but it wouldn't have made the list as far as the official top 25 cut. And the first Mass Effect, I think he was the only one to vote for it. No, Doug gave it a vote, but no, Dave did. Excuse me, Dave had all 3. So I applied his first place vote basically only to this game. I made that executive decision.
I think it's deserved, though. I think it's deserved because
I think
this
so
is
too.
By far. When you look at the series, solid series. Did a lot for gaming and was the first of its kind in a lot of ways. The idea of like a pre-planned trilogy where all of your decisions are going to carry over, some to a greater extent than others, but it still felt meaningful all the way up till the end. So that was that was a huge deal. Other games tried to do this. There was a series called Too Human you may have heard of. Ended up not being a series. It was one game, but they were going to do this. So pretty influential, pretty big deal that Mass Effect did at first. This game is just so much, I don't know how to describe it because the first one was solid. And then this one comes along. It's like everything that you know is kind of being thrown out the window. That was all just a setup for this, again, assemble the team game to go on a suicide mission. And what I love is it was actually a suicide mission. Like you could have everybody survive. You could also have everybody die. And not a lot of games do that, especially number 2 of a trilogy.
Yep.
I have a hard time. So this is obviously a great game. The characters are fantastic. The playthrough, the levels, Mordin singing might be one of my greatest moments in gaming history. I don't know why. It's just so perfect in so many ways. I think I like the first one more, though. I don't know why. I know you don't like that, Sean, and the driving around on the car is not great. There's something to build the world building that came in 1 that resonates with me so well. But I will say, playing through this game, the only thing that really knocked it down for me, because the gameplay itself, going through with some of the team is fantastic. Going on the suicide mission is great. Saving people, Harbinger as a villain is fantastic. All that, great. The only thing I hated starting the game with Shepard dying, and it's like, oh man, like come on, like I thought this character was mine, and like now you kind of reshape him. There's a problem that I had with that. That
was great. That was brilliant. I love that. So your beef with it is one of the strongest things I think. When I said you're throwing everything out that yeah, we're killing the main character in the first, and then you're like, oh, they always kill him and bring him back, and that's why I think it's so important that it wasn't what's a series that did this? Where they kill him at the end, and you're like, holy shit, how are they ever going to recover? Walking Dead did this more than once. oh, it turns out they survived actually, or there's some way to bring him back. It's like you start the game here with him dying and then bringing him back. Like, it's very organic. Like, well, of course they do. How are we going to have a Mass Effect 2 without him? And the way that they do it and how, it's not just like some magical thing that they just like, Batman, they always go to this like well and they just dunk him, the Lazarus pit. Dunk him in there. He's healed again. You can keep going back to it. This is like, yeah, we brought you back, but it costs like $1 bajillion. And we don't know if it really, like, we tried it a bunch of times and it failed. You're kind of a unique case. We thought about giving you a switch to make you obedient, but then that's not you. Just like endlessly fascinating. And the way that they took sort of a trope, but they made it one of the most interesting parts of the game. That's brilliant.
I wonder how much for me, Mass Effect 3 and the turning, like the whole thing, you play through Mass Effect 1 and the Elusive Man and the group that he runs that I'm blanking on the name on right now. Cerberus, yes. So you play through and like Cerberus is a bad thing and he's kind of this, mystical thing in 1. You play through 2 and it's like, okay, you kind of get it where it's like, okay, maybe they're outside of the government, but you agree with them in a sense. And I did like that. I really like that turning around. Martin Sheen as the voice of the Elusive Man is wonderful. I mean, it's absolutely perfect.
Dave, you hit on something great. Sometimes, and there are other examples of this that I can't remember, but where you take a small element of something that was present in the first installment, and then it becomes like a prominent in the second one. And I wish I could think of an example, but I can't. It was amazing. And yeah, you're absolutely right. The writing is so good. And if I were to go write a story, I think like, what did Mass Effect 2 do? Because the way they set it up, every character you go to recruit, it's kind of like a self-contained story. It's their own interesting thing. The Prison Break comes to mind. It's like, yeah, so for this installment, it's almost like a TV show. We're going to go do a prison break for Jack. And like, that's cool. What's next? Oh, you're with this scientist, this doctor, but he is like, he's kind of loose on the do no harm thing. And that's going to be its own story. It's just like, it's all like that. And it's amazing. Even the way that you weave in Grunt and Tally, bringing her back. Obviously, fucking Garrus, the best character of the whole trilogy, he's like a vigilante now.
Yep.
And like each self-contained thing is amazing, and then that comes into play with the side stories as well, like the loyalty missions.
This is where 3 brought it down for me, though, is so much that was good there. What happened to Cerberus and the Elusive Man in 3 bothered me so much. And
yeah, but we're talking about 3.
I know. It just took some enjoyment away from that with the direction they went. That's all.
Well, that's why it's so interesting that 2 ended up in the placement that it did, though, because as Sean said, how remarkable that it is that the middle game of a trilogy is really the standout here, but it's because 1 is the buggiest of the 3, has, I think calling it unsatisfactory combat would be kind. There are some things it does well, but obviously the series got much stronger in that regard in 2 and 3, especially 2. And like, its storytelling is relatively basic. Now, 2 takes those elements from 1, and how interesting that, so like we started off at this point, and then obviously we started branching, and we branched, and we branched, and we branched. So now in 2, as you're going through these character-specific missions, obviously some of the things from 1 impact that. You might not have a character around from 1 in 2 now, so what you got might be wildly divergent from what somebody else did, because, maybe like Ashley's dead, or maybe she's not. Who knows, right? So like, it's cool that it's the point at which this series was its best, weirdly enough, was when it was its most stretched out as far as all the different paths you could take, because it really did great on building when it was smaller in 1, and obviously we've taught it to death. When everything narrowed down to 1 point in 3, it lost the fucking plot.
And the curse for 3 is part of what makes 2 so good. They did, admittedly, shoot themselves in the foot a little bit, because how can you plan for an expansive mission in 3 if there's like I don't know what % chance that the character died in 2? So there's only, by having the ability to kill all the characters in 2, they limited what they could do in 3.
Yep.
Well, that's a 3 problem, though, not a 2 problem.
Mm-hmm.
I like how Dave started this as like, I think there's something really interesting about starting a Mass Effect 2 talk by saying how much better Mass Effect 1 was.
I just did. That's all. I just wanted to point out, because Sean, this has been a debate for 10 years now, between 13 years almost now, between Sean and I, which one's better.
Well, it's funny because like I love Mass Effect 1, but like Mass Effect 2 is like better. It's like so much better. And here's another thing that I love. Mass Effect 1, 2 does a lot better job where, so like the Star Wars thing, Knights of the Old Republic, you can play as a light side, and that's really the way to play. The dark side is like if you're, for your secondary, just to see what it's about. Mass Effect 1 is kind of the same, even though they changed the character a little bit. 2, aside from maybe 1 or 2 really weird out of left field decisions, you're just Jack Bauer. And my preferred playthrough is actually Renegade now, because it's like, I'm here, my job is to complete the mission. And if I have to throw this douchebag off a building because he's not giving me the answer, I'll do it.
And because you were dead and brought back to life, you even have more reasons to be in that mode.
Exactly.
Oh, you guys want me to do this thing? Well, fuck all y'all. I'm going to do it, I guess, but I'm going to do it my way.
Yep.
It's the fact that when you go through this game and the government doesn't help you in something that is a clear problem. It's kind of like, it alluded to Harry Potter in a way, with like in the 5th book where it's like, oh no, he's not coming back. It's totally fine. No. The Reapers aren't a problem. It's like, you fucking morons! Yeah. I can't believe I have to go off grid to save all your asses. Basically,
yeah, it's not at all like real life where everybody's united fighting climate change.
That's right. And city councils are all well regarded and they accomplish meaningful things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God damn it, Sean.
So that's what I liked about it. Is like, yeah, I kind of do believe that, like, part of because they can't believe it, right? Because if they believed it, then it's like, oh, then we have to admit the end of all things is at our doorstep.
Yeah.
And then we present the later problem of indoctrination, where some people who would have believed it now are no longer allowed to. So there's that element as well.
It's just so well written, man, and I love all the choice. Like the moment to moment dialogue is as exhilarating to me as the combat, which is much better in 2. Classes actually feel different. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Each one feels distinct. Not just like this one kind of uses powers and guns. This one uses just powers. It's like, no, if you're a Vanguard now, you're charging across the screen. It's very well done. They actually took their time with the combat, and it's great.
There's a reason it was such a phenomenon when it was, and how much we talked about it when it came out on the show.
And now, of course, the interesting problem is that we had Andromeda. So, like, forget how, like, 3's ending, which we talked to death. But, like, 3 still was a really good game and did some things very, very well. But now Mass Effect 3 was, 11 years ago. And the only thing we've had in that span is Andromeda. Obviously, we've been teased about the continuation of this saga. And who knows when 4 is going to come out. But, like, at this time, I think we would have thought, like, wow, like, this series is huge and it's only going to get bigger. Doesn't always work that way. Yeah. Can it reclaim this glory or anything approaching it? I guess we'll see in the 2020s.
Well, and it's hard because BioWare is now going the way of, like, Rare. Where you're like, man, you guys used to have magic, and the magic seems to be gone.
Yeah. The problem is... Crap, I think I lost my train of thought.
Train of thought. This is another game that suffers from the bad boss fight, which is interesting how many great
the last
games.
one was terrible. I remember what I was going to say.
Great.
Glad
I could vamp for you.
Good vamp.
No, thank you. So, yes, you're right. The last boss fight is terrible. No, this one is interesting because I've said before, like I said last week with God of War, how I like the low stakes aspect of this. This is everything but low stakes. It's the highest of high stakes, but I feel like you build it properly in the first game, and then the frustration of having people not understand how high a stakes is makes the fact that this is super high stakes feel worthwhile. So, yeah, I like it in that sense.
Well, it's the same thing that Die Hard did. Where, like, now the FBI, if you watch shows like this, 24 loves to do this. I'm here from the FBI, for the Office of the President. I'm only here to stand in your way.
Yeah.
My function in this plot is to make things difficult for you, even though we should be on the same side.
And when you get 8 seasons deep in 24, you're like, okay, but in 8 days, we've had massive, catastrophic, not even just nationwide, worldwide events that should have probably reshaped this conversation.
Did you guys have, like, a data guy that's like, hey, empirically speaking, Jack Bauer is right 100% of the time. I know you don't like him, but, like, maybe, he does a thing where he sticks a towel down the throat and talks about ripping the bile out. He's a little weird, but he gets the job done.
And we're not even talking about a world where it's like, millions of people could die from a bio. Like, there's been legitimate, like, bioweapons and presidential assassinations, and, like, maybe he should get some credit.
Yeah. I love that we brought it back to 24, though, because the writing, to me, again, in the first game, you're like, I'm the lawful, I'm going to save everybody, or like, I'm going to let the colony, like, get obliterated. in this one, you can still, the trial with Tally, you can still help Tally with the renegade side.
Mhm.
You're still a good friend. You're just kind of the asshole friend, but like still cares, rather than like the goody two shoes. And that's why I like the renegade more. Is like the lawful started feeling like, oh, he's like gross. He's like too perfect. He's like a Mary Sue. Much more interesting to be the renegade. There's only one part. I'll bring it up now. You can let Samara die, and her like daughter replaces her. I'm like, that's.
Yeah, it's a little.
It kind of came out of nowhere too. Like,
Then-
why would I do that?
Yeah.
And then you can go hook up with her later, and then you die, and it's like, oh yeah, she told me that if you hook up with her, you're gonna die.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Should've
I
listened.
figured it out. I know why no one believed Shepard. This is the
I'm glad we're back to this.
No one believed Shepard because he said every store was his favorite in the Citadel, and that's why. Like, you can't trust.
That's
this
true.
guy.
And you know, if you're renegade, which is this is actually a legitimate con, like the scarring doesn't show up, and I'm like, I don't like that. That's to me like nice old Republic, where you're like a bad guy. So you're like, I'm not a bad guy. I'm a good guy. Let my scars heal. So I pay for the surgery. It's like $50,000, and I'm like, yeah, I want to look normal again. I don't need these like scars on my eyes.
So with Jason's first being applied as a first, second, 5th, 8th, 10th, and 23rd among our 7th place here votes. I think I missed a 10th in there. Maybe I said. I don't remember. Had 7 votes, 5 of them in the top 10. So it makes sense that it made it up here.
I mean, it's borderline one of the best stories in gaming.
It's top 5.
So, well, yeah. Yeah. So, you know, there's that. Also, DLC was excellent.
Yeah.
Nothing. I think. BioShock. Jesus. Mass Effect 3's DLC was a little bit stronger. You had the epilogue one.
The epilogue one was great.
Even like the Leviathan one was very strong too.
Yeah.
Mass Effect 2. There's some interesting stuff with the thief, Kasumi.
Mm-hmm.
Good, not great, but still like really solid, especially in terms of
Worthwhile
like
additions.
when I think horse armor DLC and I compare it to Mass Effect 2, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty solid.
Number 4 on our list is The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. 6 votes, 486 points, a 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 7th, 11th, and 45th. That's me. Hi, I'm the 45th.
Do you think there's a panel on the internet that is... here, let me rephrase it. I don't know if there's a panel more against this game on the internet than the three of us right now, and it still made our 4th.
It's still number 4, and even the guy who voted for it, 45th, is like, okay,
yeah,
I get it.
Who's
it's
number
a me
one?
problem.
Who was number 1?
Number 1 was Nick.
I think he made the wrong call, but it's a very good game.
Number 2 was Peter.
So the amount of creativity in this game is astounding to me. At the time, this was like the best an open world had felt to me too. The gliding mechanics, the climbing, you climb anything. That was revolutionary after playing.
Give me a jump button.
Yeah, fucking Assassin's Creed forever, and it's like you can climb, but only like specific paths up
like
the building.
Tomb Raider, where there's paint on certain things.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, paint. I
Yeah.
get it from a game design, but you know what I mean.
You can climb everything, and like if you're in a storm and you're wearing metal, you'll get struck by electricity. It's like there's so much thought that went into every piece of this game. All of the recipes, all of the equipment. It's just insane.
You have that moment. You play this game, you wake up in a pool, and you're like, what the hell is going on here? And you don't really know what's going on. You learn the climbing mechanic. It's very similar to me to the Goomba, where you walk up to this wall, and you're like, there's a wall in front of me. What do I do? No Zelda game ever. If a wall is in front of me, I'm screwed. There's got to be a way around. Nope, you just climb right up. It's fine. And then you walk out the door, the sun shines, the world shows, and you're like, oh boy, this is going to be big. This is going to be a lot to go through. And you just have that moment of just like, where do I go first? And they lead you, but it really is. You kind of finish that first section. It's like, all right, what do you want to do? Like, how do you want to do this? Because it's up to you. And it's amazing that hasn't been done before in a Zelda game, but it also makes sense that it's done so well.
It might be the best open world in gaming. Yeah, and that's why it's number 4 with the qualms that I have with it, which we will get into. It's just like it's an amazing open world, and the physics based puzzles are very well done. There's just like you can get lost in that opening area. And unlike Dragon Age, where it feels like you can get lost, but then you're like, wait a minute, I'm just collecting useless herbs. And I've been doing this for like 20 hours now. This is like, there's meaning. Which brings me to the shrines, which is the best addition, I think, in this game, period, is these little bite-sized dungeons. You go in, you solve a puzzle, you get a reward. There's incentive to find them. They're fun to do, and you get a great reward. It's awesome.
And there's diversity among them. Some of them are combat,
Yep.
some of them are puzzles, like whatever the case might be. But this, in addition to centralized core dungeons, like we even talked about when we reviewed the game properly on the show, would be the best form of Zelda going forward.
Yeah.
Open world, great. Miniature dungeons that are fun and like give you good rewards, great. With also the big structured dungeon we expect. We're not talking negatives yet, though. But the point being, like, yes, the shrines were a phenomenal addition. You didn't even necessarily have to do all of them. Obviously, you were incentivized to do so, but you also could just be like, oh, there's one. Yeah, I feel like doing a shrine. Let's go check it out.
It's daunting. And I mean it as a pro, but it's also why, like, I'm never going to do the DLC because I'm like, I can't get back into it. It was so much. I can't do it. I beat it. I'm done with it until the sequel comes out. But
Dude, I'm telling you.
But you just
the
get
DLC
lost in it.
fantastic. The DLC is absolutely fantastic. I'm surprised how much
the DLC, you're saying.
Mm-hmm. I love the
fuck.
DLC. The playing through so much, like I never thought I would download it. And here, this is where my son loves this game. Absolutely, he plays the shit out of Breath of the Wild. He absolutely loves it. It's his favorite thing to play. He asked me to play it to get through the hard parts they can't through. And when I beat it, I showed him how to do. Like I got all the shrines. I did all this stuff. The only thing I didn't do was get all the Korok seeds because fuck that, I'm not doing it. But then I was like, well, I'm done. And he wanted to keep playing. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of sick of watching him just run around and, fight enemies and stuff. So I got the DLC. I'm like, let's see what this is. The one-hit obliterator, the Champion's Ballad, all of that stuff is a lot of content and it is super fun. I actually really enjoyed it.
How's the motorcycle?
I got it. I got the motorcycle and I'm like, cool, I'm never actually going to use this because I'm done with the game.
Yeah.
My son loves it. My son absolutely loves it.
But it deserves credit for like really good DLC on top of all the other content that you got.
Yeah. I don't know. It expands on a game that was so big in so many ways. I'm surprised that I liked the DLC as much as I did.
Yeah. And even the multiple ways to solve puzzles I loved. My best example is turning a con into a pro. I hated the motion puzzles with the ball.
I love those. Loved them.
I hated them. But you could like flip it over and just like cheat it. And it's fine. And they're like, yeah, if you want to do that, go ahead. Yeah. And there's so much freedom in the way that they built in the physics. It's just a brilliantly made game. It's like it's like we're talking about with A Link to the Past, but now a game this era getting that same full attention.
Well, it took what Skyward Sword wanted to do with the motion controls and said, okay, we can't have a full game of motion controls, but we need to incorporate them. And so we're going to have you swing your entire Switch system like you're putting a ball into a hole. I don't know. One last pro that I have for this is the replayability is off the charts. It's insane to me how many hours. I wish I knew, had a good counter of how many hours I put into this game because it is high.
Well, and you can just go straight for the boss, which is another choose your path.
Yeah, it's kind of like Chrono Trigger in that sense where you just go to the end.
And because of the physics-based gameplay and the fact that you get all your core items relatively early, you also have a speedrun haven here in a game that's going to last for a long time because of it, especially once people start figuring out how to game that system and to break it beyond what was intended, and now they can like launch themselves into Phantom Ganon or into Ganon, Calamity Ganon, like 10 minutes into the game. You're like, well, that wasn't probably what they had in mind, but sure, you managed to like stack some kind of explosive force and then shoot yourself off of a cube into the Hyrule Castle. Great, I guess. Have fun. So that's great.
I like that it takes some cell shading from Wind Waker. So it's like it feels like it's like a building on the entire foundation of Zelda.
Yeah, because you can even argue like it's sort of borrowed from Link Between Worlds in the sense that it's like, okay, you can have all these other items on the side, like different types of weapons or whatever, but ultimately the dungeon experience is going to come down to these core items, and everything else about that is going to be like combat based or whatever, but like we know what you're going to be stepping into this dungeon with, and now we can build around that because we know exactly what you're going to have.
Yeah.
And you can still make it any order you want to because now we know that. It's not going to be, okay, well, this is the 5th dungeon, so you're not going to have the Dominion Rod. Well, no, you're going to have everything you have from 2 hours into the game, so now we can build for that. A good decision overall, but it also gave us a lack of that really, really expertly crafted dungeon that I think we crave from the earlier Zelda games as we switched this to the cons. We talked about this in the review, and it still rings true for me, where it's like, The shrines are great. If they had been in addition to dungeons, this might be my favorite game of all time. But because they effectively replaced them, and I know the great beasts are kind of meant to replace the dungeons, but I didn't really enjoy my time with those. I really didn't. The idea was cool of being inside these huge structures that represent, like, it's not bad, but again, it's just not what I'm looking for from this series in particular.
Skyward, how many dungeons does Skyward Sword have?
I want to say 4 again. 4 or 5.
Great, like really well-built dungeons. Twilight Princess, same thing. And I was missing, they all kind of felt samey a little bit. And part of that was because, like we talked about, it needs to be accessible from anywhere and with any items. I didn't love the dungeons.
This broke the mold, though, that Skyward Sword had, like the spinner or whatever it was called. You didn't have this, okay, here's this item I got in this dungeon. I'm clearly going to use it for this dungeon and then this dungeon only. It kind of broke that mold, which I did appreciate. Because there were times when it was just like, okay, I don't care about this item. I have to use it for one thing and then done.
Yeah, we had gone too far in the opposite direction. But now, some of the best dungeons I can think of is like the double claw shot dungeon in Twilight Princess, where it's like, okay, you have one and you quickly figure out when you're in there, wait, I can't do this thing with only one. You get the second one, and now you're doing fucking Spider-Man zip climbing, and that stuff feels great because there's a whole dungeon built around it and a boss fight. Mm-hmm. Now we lose that because not only are the Great Beasts kind of uninteresting to explore overall, but the boss fights kind of suck. And Calamity Ganon also kind of sucks. Yeah. And that hurts because those are the biggest fights in the game and the only major combat you get, and they're not very good.
I would have liked Calamity Ganon to be nigh unbeatable, really tough, unless you do all the because what I get at the end was I probably could have beat him without doing all this other stuff.
Well, and they wanted that part to the game, but I agree with you. I would have really liked, you have to be truly elite to beat him without going and getting the Divine Beasts and solving them. Because, the fact that the Divine Beasts come in and knock out half his health, I thought was a great story element. It's hey, we're combining our power. There's no, if it was inconsequential that you did them, it would be kind of a letdown. But the fact that he knocked out half of his power and you don't have to fight each of the Wind Blight, Fire Blight, Water Blight, Ganon, and all those to start, I think is a good story mechanic. But yeah, the fact that people can go in and still beat all of those on speedruns quickly, I know people are insane with their talents sometimes, but it should have been basically impossible. I agree with you.
And the whole Calamity Ganon experience is kind of like that, right? Because story-wise, it's perfect. He's just looming over fucking Hyrule Castle, and you can see him from damn near anywhere in this huge-ass world. That's phenomenal, because it's a constant reminder of oh yeah, things are kind of messed up. Mm-hmm. And then when you actually bring that combat to a head, to have it kind of fall flat after all this build. Again, we've talked about several games, even in our top 10, 15, that had end bosses that didn't necessarily meet that high bar the rest of the game had set. But this one is so far below the bar. And maybe it's just because the exploration ultimately is what's king in this game. It's the core experience and what I even loved about it and why it barely made my list to begin with. Because otherwise my flaws outweigh the strengths. But goddamn, exploring is great. Yeah. So maybe that's the problem, is that's what I really love about the game. And there was no way for you to replicate that experience in a boss. You can't explore a boss. So I guess I was doomed from the start.
Maybe it's like the Skyrim problem. It's all the stuff around the main stuff is great. Yeah. And the main stuff is okay.
The problem is the main stuff is Ganon. Yeah, it's not just some dragon that I've been told I'm supposed to care about. It's this core villain of the series, and now it's he's an afterthought.
The final dungeon having Ballad of the Windfish from Link's Awakening, it gives a bonus point.
And Zelda's Lullaby and the original Legend of Zelda theme. That as much as I think the music of this game is meh, that track is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's in my top 5 Zelda songs if I ever do that list with Michaela.
I forget who I was talking with, and I was this Ballad of the Windfish. What are you talking about? I was oh boy, let me go back and tell you one of my favorite Zelda games, Link's Awakening. They've remixed it. I love this song. Yeah, I mean, that's great. I love that. I love the former champions. I love that element of the game.
That's cool. The flashbacks were always appreciated when they happened. When we did get those story bursts and seeing the relationship with Link and Zelda and the past champions, all those well done. It does so many things exceptionally well that it really makes its warts more apparent to me, which is why I had it where I did. I also was not going to make the mistake of doing what I did 10 years ago and just taking something off my list that deserves to be on it. So I wasn't going to repeat that even though I put it low.
I will say, I'll push back a little bit on the Divine Beasts. I actually liked the manipulation of them. I think that was the unique aspect of them. The fact that you had to go in and whether you had to turn the bird one way to manipulate your surroundings. That replaced a little bit of the item the fact that the items weren't there for it. And
I think I'd be more with you if it was like that was one.
Yep, exactly.
But it was like the same idea, but for all of them.
I know that was different between the 4. So I'm kind of with both of you in the same sense where I'm like, the first time I was, oh, cool. Like, I got to rotate this part and this, that. And then the fourth time I'm like, okay, but I'm still kind of just doing the same thing, just a little bit different.
And then this has been done to death, but I will just say it. To throw it out there, I was also not a fan of the equipment breaking.
Yeah,
I just wasn't.
Has been
I was like, I get it. I get why. Doesn't mean I liked it.
It's the biggest con. It's the fact that, you're used to getting your items and you're used to being able to use them throughout all the Zelda games. And you get to a point, especially if you're not a particularly strong player, where you like miss a lot or like you're not great at fighting, your weapons break and then you lose the good stuff and you have to go chase down new good stuff, and it's really difficult in that sense. Like, if you had one that you used to death, it's like, oh great, do I keep using it when it says it's badly damaged? Should I finish using it? Should I hold on to it? Do I save it? Like, I don't know. And then you get to a point where you're in a bad boss battle and your master sword has to go sleepy time. Like, great.
Yeah.
Cool.
I kind of wonder now, as I thought about it more with time passing, where I'm like, I wonder if it would have been better if there was just some average equipment that you could get that was permanent. Obviously, it would make sense to have better versions given the way they set this up, whether you agree with it or not. I get why it's like, okay, you had this really special weapon, but it only lasts for so long or whatever. But at least then you're not feeling like I had to switch weapon styles, because now I've broken all of my pole arms. So now I have to switch to sword or whatever else you might switch to, right? So like you have something that's okay, it'll get you through, but then you can specialize in stuff and save those for bosses without feeling like, okay, I can't use them ever because then I'm going to be limited in a certain It's a dumb little solution. I don't know what the answer is. I wasn't a fan of the system, whatever it was, and that kind of hurt it for me.
Can I just say that I did a Zelda article like years ago? It was like, here's how the series should change. I got so much hate. And like most of the stuff Breath of the Wild did. The jumping, people were incensed that I was like, there should be a jump button.
Happened with Elden Ring too.
Yeah.
It was first announced. You can't jump in a Souls game.
Yeah.
Well.
Different equipment. Like, I liked that you could use a spear and an axe. Like, that was all great.
Sure.
I just was like, it's breaking after like 4 hits. Maybe that was my issue. I like the idea of forcing players to adapt. Use the different equipment. Not just sticking with one. It's like, well, now I've gone the whole game with this one spear. But it was just like too much. It's too frequent.
Like 20 hits? Yeah. Probably not enough hits. That's like 3 combos on certain enemies.
Yeah. And please, for the love of God, if you try to play the master mode, forget that. You better be damn near perfect at everything you do in the master mode, because your weapons will break immediately.
Great.
They're too powerful.
Even the idea of the charging and decharging of the master sword isn't necessarily inherently bad of itself.
No.
But instead, it just represents this like limp dick approach to weapons, and it's like no more iconically placed than the master sword, the weapon of legends, needing a nap every now and then.
Because it kind of backfired, because then I ended up not ever using my best equipment. Because like, well, I gotta save it. Like elixirs. It's the elixir thing. Gotta save it for the end game, and then I finished the game with 20 elixirs that I should have used before.
Yeah.
Yep.
So boy, I mean, it's divisive among our panel. Obviously, this was the game of the year almost unanimously in a year that had 2 other heavy hitters, 3 heavy hitters really, because Horizon too. But
still great.
Yeah, but it does some things so well. It's just, man, its flaws are deeply apparent.
The island, ingenious. By the way, just the last thing. You go, I don't know how many hours you're in by the time you it probably depends, but then you lose all your equipment, and it's just like its own mini thing.
Yeah, great side mission.
Loved it.
And I love the intro. Not just the part Dave mentioned, but just kind of having to explore this still big but limited area at the start and collecting that beginning equipment, and a ghost keeps talking to you and always actually the king. Like, it sets the stage perfectly, and then when you expand even further beyond, you're ready for it and the world is waiting. And man, it's so good and also so bad at times. What a weird thing to say about number 4, but it feels right.
Yeah.
I'm very excited for Tears of the Kingdom to see what they do next.
Oh, yeah.
It could be phenomenal, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Just like between 8 and 7, there was a jump between 4 and 3.
Platinum Plus.
Almost another 100 points, basically another first place vote. Separated the Platinum from the Platinum Plus, as Sean just put it. So
double that.
Our top 3 were, once again, separated, not all that close. Number 3 is Chrono Trigger. 7 votes. That's the wrong number of points. I don't know why that happened. It's 593, not 473. What happened? I actually made a mistake. This is bullshit. I hate mistakes.
Oh no.
Chrono Trigger was a first, a second, a 7th, a 13th, a 15th, and a 29th. It's my number one. That did not change from 10 years ago. It probably never will. And it ended up here because the 2 games above it got slightly more support. One of them got more votes and more points. One got the same amount of votes and more points. But again, these top 3 are just a clear step above. They're in their own echelon. And I think it's kind of appropriate because our panel loves all 3 of the top 3.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, why don't you start on this one? Because this is your baby.
This is the one that, I never would have played this game if it wasn't for Chris. So please, you have the floor, sir.
I know we've talked about it probably a dozen times on the show by now, but I sort of subjected Dave into listening to the music from this game in his car.
Yep.
Because this is going to trigger some of our young folks probably. But back in the day, we had to record either on a Walkman or eventually burn our own CDs. Remember CDs? Yeah, nobody does. Anyways, I think what's remarkable to me, there was never a question this was number one for me still. Even with some of the games that have come out, even with both games that are above this, nothing has come close to this. And it's more remarkable to me with time how many things they got right in this game that came out 27 years ago. The combat system, interacting with the environment around you and not just random encounters, which at the time was remarkable. The soundtrack, one of the best in video gaming history. The time travel mechanics, a thorny subject because it's very easy to do time travel very poorly. And instead, a core mechanic that really enriches the entire experience. The twist in the middle, where your main character is fucking killed and does not have to be brought back to beat the game. We kind of talked about it with 6. Here, even more so, because this is your self-insert. This is your silent protagonist. This is you. And he gets eradicated by Lavos about 2/3 of the way through the game. And the party's like, we'll figure it out, I guess. And yes, you can go get him. And you should. It's better that way. The multiple endings. Way ahead of its time for this era. The fact that it still looks beautiful today, yes, it's sprite-based and it looks a little bit more dated now compared to something like a Horizon Forbidden West or an Elden Ring that has these top-of-the-line graphics today. It baffles my mind that this team was able to produce this game in this era. This is a game that should have been made 15 years later.
I'm realizing something. The episodic approach to stuff is better. And I think it's because each part gets attention rather than one long narrative where we're just telling a story and we kind of meander and, there's a malaise. No, it's every time period has its own cool story, theme, and thing that happens. The politics of the one where you meet the princess and you get there's a trial, and then the Robo thing. Maisie cried on this part where he's like, "Hey guys, I've just been waiting for 10,000 years by myself. Nice to see you again." It's so much good stuff for, again, a game that's really had no business telling a story of this caliber this early on.
Well, and it starts out, again, the only time, I've had so many times where the only time I'm okay with world-ending stakes is when you build it properly. This starts out with, hey, I'm a little kid and I'm going to go to the fair. Yay! Yep. That's it. And then everything gets fucking haywire.
Discover.
Yes.
Lavos, because even I played this game late, like you, Dave. I still didn't know what was coming. And so, Chris, you talked about the twist. I actually thought that's the first one you meant is by the way, you discover the Armageddon is coming.
And that's not even the first. The first thing is you accidentally time travel, which is already oh, that's a strong hook. And you go back and you figure out oh, there's paradox happening because she's died back then and her dies now, and then family lines. And then you accidentally end up in the future, and then you push a button, and then everything changes.
Yeah.
Yep. And you have to then go build yourself up to figure out what happened. There's the time travel element of the fact that Magus meets himself back in the day and he's time traveled through. He's got his own issues. Magus joining your party was another fantastic twist that they do. Again, so many things that are just hey, that's a cool element. But back then, absolutely mind-blowing. The fact that you fight this guy and he's so overpowered and then he can join your party and helps you out. So awesome in so many ways.
Yeah, I don't know why more games haven't done this battle system. It's really solid and fun and active, and it's this is the only game that really has done it.
There's still a bit of turn-based nature to it. There is an ATB gauge of sorts, but you also can kind of like wait to see what's happening. You know, if you want to hold a moral turn to see if you need some healing because the monster is going to attack, you can always kind of sit on her turn, have the others attack. Like there's some flexibility to it. Do I like 10's battle system more, Final Fantasy 10? Like probably with the clear turn order, but like plenty fine for what it was. And again, the fact that you were doing it in the environments, like there were fights you'd run into, and then like an enemy would pop out of a bush and you'd fight it in that map right there. Like again, it's easy to forget now, but this was 1995.
And like, why is a frog a knight and awesome and the best character? Like, it's so creative and great.
Too, by the way,
yeah.
Like, the triumphantness of his music is just—it's got sadness, but also triumphant. It's perfectly.
Well,
written.
this is the legendary team, right? The game designer, the composer, and then Toriyama doing the art.
Mm-hmm.
And they tried it again, Blue Dragon, and we didn't get the same result.
No, we did not.
We're talking about battle mechanics too. The fact that you can join your attacks together is something that I don't think had been done in turn-based.
That's what I kind of meant. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the fact that you can go and like, hey, I've got this party that I use, but I kind of like this other party because their joint attack is really good when you can get in there. And then you can work together. You can not work together. You're like fighting a boss and you're like, oh, I need to heal everybody. So I have to do it's. Yeah, it's so good.
So Chris touched on this with the multiple endings, which, super groundbreaking and fun and amazing. Some of them are awesome. Some of them are terrible. Some of them are just goofy. And that's fun. You can go fight the boss right away. One thing we didn't touch on, though, I don't know how many games did a New Game Plus in earnest, or at least to this. So fun. And like it compels you to want to go find more of these endings. Because it's so fun to go back through the game and just obliterate everything.
You can get through the pretense of like sometimes when you want to go explore more, maybe you didn't do all the side missions on the way through, which were optional, by the way. You know, I don't know how many games did side missions like that. Like so many games you didn't have to do that. And then now you can go back and be like, all right, I'm sick of little creatures popping on me. Bam, bam. Okay, done. Move on. Yeah. Like there's no problem with it. I can go through this game much faster this time.
I don't remember what it was exactly, but I had a thing of like summoning like beams of light. And I in my New Game Plus, I was just going through and just summoning pillars from heaven, just decimating everything. It was amazing.
Yeah. And Chris, you mentioned the music. I know, and the music in this had so much heart to it. It's this game that really turned me on to video game music. I don't know that it was a big deal to me up until hearing this game's music, but like the trial music is so fitting for this, like, oh, I don't know what's going on. This feels kind of wonky, to Frog's music, to Lavos coming in and feeling this epicness of
the final boss. So good.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Both forms.
Yeah.
Yep.
Battle with Magus, maybe the standout track from the entire game and one of the pivotal moments in the game.
Yep. And from a 16-bit system, Jesus. Christ.
And I love that the end fight is like it's Lavos. It's not, it's actually you from the future. You're the secret. You're the puppet master. It's like, no, it's just like Lavos. We don't need to like get super weird. You're building this fight with Lavos. You fight Lavos.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, the enemies along the way are sort of, I mean, there are some bad guys, like Ozzy or whatever, but like for the most part, it's kind of like the situation is the enemy. There's a difference in each time period, in the future. It's like we're all starving to death and everybody's scrounging to survive. But like in general, you're kind of fighting against despair more than you're fighting against an enemy. Lavos embodies that because he's always present. Keeps popping up in every area that you're in to fuck with you, and like eventually you're gonna take him down. But Lavos himself doesn't really do anything. He eats worlds and destroys them, but like there's no character growth. You don't have conversations with him. There's no motivations. But because he is so omnipresent, it feels like there's just this constant threat lurking. At some point we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that. He's killing everybody in every time era we go into, but somehow we have to find a way.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that.
Yep.
And it comes down to the choice at the end of the day. Like I said, you can bring back Chrono. You don't have to. You can kill Magus as revenge for Frog, or you can invite him in the party. People probably made very different decisions on that. And again, maybe in the New Game Plus, you took it the other way to see what happened. But at the time, you could have a 6-character party and not 7 because you could just kill him.
Yep. And you could, and the fact of this is one of those games too, when you go talk to, I can only imagine playing this when it came out and then talking to your friends about it and being like, oh yeah, I totally killed Magus. What do you mean? You can have him join the party. What do you mean you can join the party? What?
Yeah. He's a bad guy, right? Well, yeah. For the first half of the game, outside of Lavos, he kind of is. Sure, he's kind of a dick, but Turns out he's got some motivations, and you know about all of them before you decide whether or not you want to kill him, because you have the entire arc in Zeal before that moment.
Yep, it's so good. This is a stupid question, but I learned way too embarrassingly late that 3 of the bosses were legendary the guitar player names. I didn't know that, and I felt really stupid about it.
Ozzy / Flea.
Yep. I knew Ozzy and Flea. I'm like, Slash isn't anybody. That's stupid. And then I'm like, oh, I feel dumb.
Game of the Year awards from 1995. Both Game Players Magazine and Gamest, which I think is European, I'm not positive though, gave it to Virtua Fighter 2.
Interesting.
Game Fans' 4th annual awards awarded it to Yoshi's Island, which is a really good game that got no votes from us, and I think it's kind of slept on. It's actually really good.
You know, the truth is, Virtua Fighter 2, I mean, look how great it's aged.
Yeah, and I liked Virtua Fighter. It was actually one of my favorite fighting games in arcade. But come on, Twisted Metal from Electronic Gaming Monthly. Remember EGM? That was a thing.
Yeah.
And the Twisted Metal franchise was kind of a big deal. Where is it today? Now, I guess you could argue where's Chrono today because, you know. And I also should point out the Metacritic score on this. Now, look, Metacritic's a little bit untrustworthy when you go back this far because it's not pulling from the same pool of reviewers. But the fact that Chrono Cross is rated higher than this is a fucking travesty. So, you know, I haven't really been pointing those out. They've just been fun facts on the side for people watching us. But it's a joke.
Yeah, I mean, it's beloved. Everybody knows, like, everybody. This made me want to go play it again. It's been a while. I don't remember a lot of it. I remember the big moments, and I've forgotten a lot of the rest of it.
I want to say I've played through this 6 or 7 times.
Oh my God.
Not just New Game Plus. I played through it a lot, and so I remember a lot of it, fortunately. So it's still there. It's still great.
I need to play it again myself. I took Michaela through it a few years ago. It's on the channel. You can always go check it out. I think it's part of why it was her number 2. So I got to do it again vicariously. I also got to fuck with her a lot, which was great. Like I didn't tell her that Chrono could be brought back. I was like, yeah, he's dead. Bye. And she believed me.
Did she solve, as a sneak preview, did she solve the trial properly?
God, I don't remember.
I wouldn't think
so. I tried to kind of stay hands off with that so that she would get whatever result she got, and if that included execution, then so be it, because I kind of wanted just to see how it would go. I think it was 4-3, and I think it was not guilty. Because, like, she ate the lunch, but she brought the cat back. Like, there was enough. I think she just... But I have to go back and look. I remember it was close.
Right.
I think I was guilty.
I was guilty.
I'm pretty sure. Well, the fact that you have these seemingly inconsequential things that affect the gameplay later, not that much, really, because it doesn't matter what your verdict is. The same thing happens. But Jesus, like... That is groundbreaking for the time, too.
Yeah,
and a couple of those I don't think you can really avoid unless you know better. Like, I don't think you know to stand still when she's shopping for 10 seconds, because it's like, nothing's happening. I'm going to push a button, and then she drags you back. And then that's held against you in the trial. You're like, oh, shit. Or, like, you run into her, and it's like you both collide, but the jury blames you for it if you don't own up to it. So, like, little stuff like that. Again, 1995. This isn't Mass Effect, which came out at the end of the 2000s.
Yeah.
So as more time goes on, the more convinced I am it's the best game that's ever been made, and I don't think it's all that close. If anything, it's reaffirmed the way I felt about it 10 years ago. But there are 2 games that finished higher than it, so while I could have my beef with that, I don't really have a problem with either one of them.
Really quick, so we've hit your number 1. We have yet to hit my number 1.
And we haven't hit Dave's number 1.
And we haven't hit Dave's number 1. Oh, okay. That tells me
and
Dave's
they're
number
different
1
games of the 2 that we have left.
Interesting.
Yeah. We all have our top 3 are top 3, but we all picked one of the 3 as our
That's
top
cute.
game.
I know we're like weighted kind of high, which is what it should be, honestly, for a few different reasons. But it also, I think it means we voted for good games.
Right. And again, a single number 1 vote, even from us, with the way the points were weighted, not enough to get in the top 25. So it had an impact, but that was by design, and it still needed a ton of support. Our next game had 7 votes. Our number 1 had 9. It was the most by far. Nothing else even had 8.
I'm kind of over the moon about both of these. We'll see what hindsight does, but I'm pretty happy with how this turned out.
I'm pretty happy, too. I don't think I would want our next game to be our number 1.
Yeah, I agree.
Our number 2 is Persona 5 Royal. This should not come as a surprise to anybody who is engaged with our channel, because Sean and I had already loved it. We convinced Dave to play it because, again, even though it's a long RPG, and that's not really his jam, it was also a combat system that we knew he would like quite a bit. We had a 3-hour review of the original Persona 5 with me and Jason on the show when it came out. There's an episode of it. It's a 2-parter. I don't remember what numbers. So, like, this isn't a shocker for anybody who's followed the channel for some time. Of course we love this game. It did end up at number 2. It was only maybe 25 or 30 points off of being number 1. But I don't mind that it ended up here. I think it's appropriate. You could argue it's a little too high. I don't really give a shit.
It's a little too high on one hand because, like, so Dave had it number 1. I had it 6. Chris had it.
Let me pull it up because that's a good point.
This super high.
If we're, it was high still. First for Dave, 5th for me, 6th for Sean.
Sorry, I meant like it wasn't like your number 1 or obviously or number 2.
So a first, a 5th, and a 6th from us. A 2nd, a 4th, an 8th. And a 28th.
So, like, ideally to me, this is like 4 or 5. Obviously, I voted it that way. But I also am like, when you do a panel, your panel has quirks. It's why Final Fantasy VI was Game Informer's number 1. Another panel would do something else. So, with how much we love Persona, like, to me, this just feels right. And this is very much in the camp of we've been of two minds sometimes. How revolutionary was something and how much did something perfect it? And I think this is very much in the camp of how much did it perfect it, because it's like the perfect game. And maybe I'm biased or whatever. I think it's a perfect game. I think the story is great. I think the combat is great. I love the calendar and going to see people. I think the writing is impeccable. And there's so much layers to the themes and the different things that they explore. Every character is interesting. It's just like a phenomenal experience to play through.
What blows my mind is I remember rating Persona 5, the original, the vanilla, a 10. And then Royal came out and I was like, oh, this is better. Shit. Like, yeah. How could it get better than a 10?
Yeah, it is. I love the new shit. I love the new shit. I like Kasumi. I like the counselor. I like that whole end plot. My small beef is that you can miss it completely.
Yes.
Which for 130 hour at that point, if you play that, is kind of annoying. But I will forgive it because it's so damn excellent.
It is. So again, this is something that you guys highly recommended I play. I got lucky in the time that I played it where it coincided with my son being born and me having time off of work to be able to play it. And then COVID hit and I had a lot of time to play it because I wasn't doing anything. But man, like the way this game is crafted to, you hit the ground running. Some of those games, like really, these big epic games, when you hit the ground running and you're like, oh shit, I don't know what I'm doing, but like something big is going on. And then you have to back your way in and figure out, okay, what happened? How do I get here? What happened? Those are great. I think that's great storytelling. You go through and you build your team up, you build these characters, you get to know these characters almost in a very intimate way. I feel you feel their stories, you get to know them, you work with them, you can choose how deep you want to go in these stories with, but they're still with you ride or die the whole way. The fact that the gameplay goes from life simulator where I'm like, do I want to go out and have noodles tonight or try to eat a 7-story hamburger? I'm not sure which one I really want. Well, I'm kind of sick of like doing life simulator. Let's go into the fucking metaverse and have everything mind blow and have the weirdest enemies that you can while trying to solve this puzzle and right the world of its wrongs. It has this balance in a way that I haven't seen a game do so much, where it's like so many games are like, this is the gameplay, that's it. This, you get tired of doing one and you can switch it up to a total another, and then you get tired of this and you go back in and do it. It's so perfectly crafted.
And everything ties together in meaningful ways. You spend time with your confidants, whether those are party members who then get more like attacks and battle benefits, or like side characters who also still have some interesting stories, except for the journalist. She sucks. And
the gun guy.
He's at least a little better, but they are sort of down at the bottom, milling together, especially because his rewards are not very good too.
Yeah.
So like
neither hers.
But the point being, like, you can spend time with them and you get story, but you also get from the gun guy, you get like added inventory, you get like more time if you decide to go up with the teacher, or like you can even date her, which is weird, but we're not going to talk about that. It's like everything just sort of feeds into itself. Not only is the gameplay loop phenomenal, like Dave mentioned, but then everything you're doing has both story and game rewards. So it never feels like you're wasting your time. You're always building towards something that's going to help you in the future when you really need it in the dungeons and the stuff that matters. So like at no point, if anything, it's almost like there's just enough to do that there's always something, and yet, despite there being so many options, the rewards are so perfectly balanced that you also never feel like I'm missing out. Mm-hmm. It's just enough. It's such a interesting balance
Yeah.
to me, because some games do that opposite, where it's like, this is too important, and now I can't spend time with all these characters. What do I do? Or none of this matters. What am I doing?
I don't know what this is called, but there's a thing that some games do. XCOM is a great example. I have money that I've gotten and I need to build to expand the base, but I only have so much and I need to be strategic of where I spend it before my next payday. Fire Emblem did it. Super addicted to like, okay, I'm going to go on the mission. I got to pair these people together and build their Persona. Big time is like, okay, I have this many days and I have this many people I need to talk to. What relationships am I going to up? What perks am I going for that's going to unlock this whole new thing? And I love that. This game is like addicting to me. But you don't have to. Like, if you want to go and just be like, yeah, I'll talk to who I want to when I feel like it, like, that's great too. So like it rewards different players for different approaches. And I think that that's awesome.
Addicting is the right word. I cannot believe how late I stayed up playing this.
Same.
My God.
I was regularly 2 or 3 in the morning every night when I was playing this.
I remember one night, I think it was, I know exactly when it was. So the big twist in this game, I saw 5:30 in the morning when I saw that twist. I started at like 10 p.m. I think Courtney went to bed and I saw 5:30 in the morning. I'm like, I have been playing this game for 7.5 hours and I'm still here.
I told you the famous story, right? About how I actually caught the twist, but I didn't really, because I just figured it was a typo. And I didn't know it was going to, I was like, oh, they got the order wrong. Actually, they didn't mention that later.
They're like, it's a minor plot hole, so you don't think much of it, one way or the other.
Oh, that's the whole thing. It's all of it.
Almost laughably too much, but it's fine.
Yeah. Oh my God. So good. I love so many characters. I love so much. Akechi is like, oh my God. And he only gets better in Royal.
Mm-hmm.
That's the next thing I was going to point out. It's like everything the original Persona did, which is fan-fucking-tastic. Royal did better. They fleshed out Akechi in such a great way.
Yep.
And the extra content. You mentioned already. I have never thought more about extra content from an existential, like, God, am I doing the right thing here? Like, I don't know. Is this bad? Should I be fighting against this? What would I do in this? Like, I spent nights thinking about, like, man, what if this could be real? And what would I do? And how would I react to this? And would I want to fight it? I don't know. Like, the questions in my mind blew my mind.
Especially given your role as the person who recognizes that something is off, but everybody else kind of seems to be okay with it. Even the people you're closest with, in some ways, their life has improved because the things that they struggled with before that point have sort of been mysteriously solved for them.
Yep. Man, and like the games that make you feel something, few and far between. We've all admitted that. This is one of them for sure. Multiple points in the story, I was like revved up or very sad or conflicted. And I mean, I'm a slut for stories where they build up like insurmountable odds, especially if they're relatable. Like in the real world, it's like, Elon Musk, he's a fucking piece of shit. He's never going to get what's coming to him. He has all the world's wealth. What's going to happen? And it's like, no, you can actually do something. And it's a fantasy and whatever, but I dig it. I really love that part of the game. And it starts small. Just a high school teacher who's an asshole, and then it just expands.
Borderline rapist scumbag.
Yeah.
And then it expands to basically like human cognition.
And I didn't need that, to be honest. We talk about the scale and all that. And I mean it as a testament to the game. It could have just been smaller scale, and I would have been fine. It was so strongly written.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm staring at the goosebumps while I'm thinking about this game and how good it is.
Same.
And like I've been begging Courtney to play through it, and I think she might actually try. I don't know if it'll happen, but I want her to try.
This is about Dave, just really quick, because you said it's about as far afield from a game that Maisie would like as you can think of. And I mean, we have her vote. You probably read it. It's up there on hers.
She was 4th.
4. Yeah. She played it and loved it.
And on top of all of the great things we just said, I have never in my life been more hyped by a musical score than Life Will Change. Going into a dungeon, hearing that guitar riff, I'm like, fuck yeah, let's do it.
We never even talked about the music yet, which is
so good.
Excellent.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
And it's a part of like, we already have spent hours talking about this game, but like even the small stuff it nails. The menus are so fucking cool.
Yeah.
Just switching between menus and your character's doing flips and there's cool shadows and the color scheme is perfect. The music, the UI, and everything. So this is what I kept coming back to when I saw this finish second was, we already kind of touched on it. Royal made a 10 out of 10 game better. If this is vanilla Persona 5, I feel like it ends up in that 4th or 5th spot that Sean mentioned. But because Royal just takes everything from the huge, like the extra arc at the end, to the small, like some additional guidance when fusing personas.
Baton
or like,
passing.
Yeah, or more clearer ideas of what you're going to get from spending time on a certain day on a certain thing. It fixed everything that was even slightly, not even wrong, just in need of improvement from the first version of this. So it is damn near a perfect game.
Yeah.
Which is
Truly.
the thing. We don't throw that word around.
No.
We don't, because we hold true to the idea that like a 10 out of 10 is supposed to be sacred. Maybe there is no such thing as a perfect game, but we give those out sparingly. This was a unanimous 10 out of 10 from all three of us. So it being number 2, fine.
And we didn't even really talk about the combat, which is like really solid too. Like it's so fun. It's like the pinnacle of turn-based.
Yep. It is. It's fast. It's easy. It's the, okay, I've already learned this, so I'm going to hit one button and boom, I'm here. I don't have to go searching through menus. Like, you can get tons of spells, you get tons of personas, or you can hit one button, it'll pull up the persona you need, and boom, go. Like,
and it's so smart and strategic, and I've actually thought more about it since since I played it. Is like the way that it's designed, just it meshes perfectly with the entire experience. So to stagger everybody, which you want to get an all-out attack, you have to spend your mana. Your mana is limited because you only have like so much time to devote to this like dungeon runs, and it's not easily refilled. Although you can address that a little bit later. Yeah. So you're like, do I spend this to get an all-out attack, or do I take a chance and then get, especially on the harder difficulties, get fucking mowed down? And it just makes it so strategic and smart, and I love it. I love it.
I remember the feeling, like, so much of this feeling, what you felt. And I remember, like, when I played through Persona 5 Strikers, which is not as nearly as good of a game as this.
Not even close.
No, not even remotely.
Didn't give out.
No, but playing through that, I remember going to the last dungeon, hearing Life Will Change play, and thinking, this is it. I'm not going to experience this game in this same way ever again. Yeah. And it hit me really hard in a way games haven't hit me in a way.
Yeah,
like that.
Beating the game will do the same thing for me.
Yes.
It's like, oh, it's over.
I remember finishing the first Persona 5 because I think it's the longest game I ever played. And I remember looking at the credit screen and just sitting back and going like, what did I just experience?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I have 10 to 12 of those in my life. Not just video games, movies or TV shows. Steins Gate. I sat there afterwards as the credits were rolling and I just kind of went, huh. And those experiences are so rare. This was one of them. And it happened both times even because the end arc of Royal is so compelling that even though I'd already played the base game and knew what to expect from this, I was still kind of like, wow, they added on a thing that made perfect sense and flowed naturally with everything they built before. Yep. So like that is such a rare thing. And like you said, will I play a game better than this in my lifetime now? Because again, like I have Chrono Trigger as my number 1, but I played that years ago before Persona. So now I'm like, will I play a game as good as this again? Probably, but who knows?
There's no way Persona 6 is going to be as good. There's just no way, right?
It's possible. It's possible.
I don't know. I remember Chris talking so highly about Persona 4, especially Persona 4 Golden, and how much they liked it.
Yeah.
5 improved every single thing about it. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Because if you're into 4, it's really more about the aesthetic, the characters, which are still really good, the murder mystery part, which I did kind of miss some aspects of in 5. And I don't know, in some ways having the dungeons be more themed for the characters themselves, kind of like Futaba's, instead of like the enemy, was kind of cool in its own way. But yeah, I mean, like 3 to 4, I love some of the themes in 3. 3 is so fucking dark, and it does some things really well. But from a gameplay perspective, from a quality of life perspective, 3 to 4, and then 4 to 5, it's impossible to go back. Yeah. So my hope is, if 6 continues to iterate, and if its story is anywhere close, maybe we're looking at something in the same caliber, but who knows?
And you're right. And it's not to like bash it and be like, no, I don't think so, or cynical. I just like, this is like the perfect amalgamation of everything. Like I talked about, the themes that they go for is like anarchy and like overcoming like these bad people in power, mixed with great gameplay, mixed with characters I care about, like the thieves aesthetic, which is really cool. It just like brought it all together in this like perfect cocktail. I just love it. I fucking love it. Played through it twice. 230, 50 hours of this.
I try to count, like, I think I did a count one time of, like, the fact that I spent 100 hours on vanilla, 130 hours on royal, and then another 40 to 50 on strikers. I'm like, oh my God, I've spent 300 hours of my life on this stupid thing.
Yeah.
And it went by in an instant.
Yeah.
It did.
Yeah, you don't feel it. Like, whereas some games, I'm like, okay, I'm like ready. Where's the end? Where's the end? And this one, I'm like, I'm sad when it's over.
Yep, 100%.
But it's not our best game of all time.
I mean, not according to me.
There is an omission from our list that has not reappeared yet. It was our number one game last time. It held its number one spot this time. In fact, 3 games from the top 5 last time were still in the top 5 this time, and the other 2 weren't out last time we did this. So, to a certain extent, their pedigree has endured the test of time over the last 10 years. It's ironic that I mentioned the time or a gap in age, because our number one game is Ocarina of Time.
Man.
This is 9 votes, 645 points. A first, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, a seventh, an eighth, a 17th, and a 25th. So it was high up on a ton of lists. It still was relatively close. Now, again, it was 13 points separate just because Persona 5 had some very high votes as well. But nonetheless, it emerged by 13 points as our number one game of all time. It was that in 2012 when we first did this. It is that in 2022. And I think in large part it's because I voted for it. I'm going to take credit. Now, it took everybody's work. I'm not like, hey, me. But I didn't have this on my list last time because I was counterculture or just trying to get other games higher up on the list. It was a little shitty move by me. I'll admit it. It's now my number 8. It did not make my top 7 echelon. It was just outside of it, but I put it where it belonged, and because of that, it now finished first instead of what would have been third. Now, again, everybody's votes counted to that. But the point being, it was that thin of a margin, and me finally coming around and stop being like a little moody 25-year-old helped me the difference to be like, okay, this game gets its proper recognition as the best game of all time.
Yeah, well, because it's fucking amazing. Man, this is another one where, like, I don't really know where to begin. As, like, an experience that is crafted from, like, waking up in your little bed, in your little tree. At the time, this was probably the best looking game I had ever played. It was maybe the best looking game that had ever been made, some PC games notwithstanding. And I tease all the time, and it's a little more than teasing because I actually have given it a lot of thought. It's like, more than anything, I want to adapt this game into like a trilogy of movies because I think it's so strong and the storytelling is so good in the subtle ways. And the relationships and the things that you infer, and obviously Ganon coming. We talked about this in Final Fantasy VI. Coming and destroying the world, and you're in the future where it's ruined and awful, and then you go back as a kid, and so I think the thing that endures for me is, unlike Wind Waker, which I love, but there's some dungeons I'm like, I don't really want to do the dungeons, or I don't want to be the bird person. Like, I love all these dungeons, I love all the puzzles. They're all so fun and well put together, and there's not a dungeon I look at and I'm like, I don't want to do that. Even the water temple, it's annoying, but it's like fun, and when you figure it out, it's really rewarding. It's just like, it's immaculate.
You know, it's funny. This game has a little open world feel to it.
Certainly at the time.
For that era.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the first time you step into Hyrule Field.
Yeah. I mean, you can kind of go where you want in a sense. Like, it puts you on a track, but you can kind of go around a little bit around Hyrule Field and just explore. I mean, it's not like Breath of the Wild, but I mean, it's there for 20 years earlier.
At the time, somebody tried... I remember a review being like, making this game better would almost be as daunting of a task as counting the steps across from this thing to this thing. For this period, this world was enormous.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the variations of the world too. Like this, you would experience different characters throughout Zelda. Like, you knew about the Zoras a little bit, you knew about the Gorons a little bit, but like, you go in there and you experience them, you talk to them, you see all the different worlds and how they react, there's just so much depth in it. You feel these different people and what they need, their plights, whatever they go through, and they help you, they you help them, it's really good to introduce you to what became lore down the road of Zelda.
I think, to me, you mentioned already, like Ganon wrecking the world. There isn't really a lot of hints as to what's going to happen there. Even with 6, which we talked about before when it came up, we see that Kefka's, a little crazy. Like you mentioned, the Doma Castle stuff, the poison. Like, we know he's kind of a threat. Here, like, we know Ganon's a concern. We see the scene of, like, Zelda looking at him through the window, and he's bowing, and, like, he looks over, and whoa. Like, we know he's a threat. But we don't really recognize the impending nature of how fucked everything's going to get until you're just thrust into it. Because it's just like, get these 3 medallions, pull the Master Sword, you're the hero. Why is Ganondorf laughing? What? And then you wake up, you get accosted by an old man who put clothes on you when you were sleeping for 7 years, and then you step out into the world and you go, oh, fuck.
Yeah, also pierce your ears.
Yes. Gave you an ear piercing, changed your clothes. Presumably, I don't know if you had to be fed for the 7 years, but he would have done that too.
So
not a good look for Rauru.
It's weird. Like, you don't normally associate twists with Zelda games because they're not super story based to begin with. Being on this plucky adventure where this young hero, you get a marriage invite from the Zora princess. You also have another princess who seems really into you, and it's just like fun and carefree.
And you're dancing with Darunia. The Gorons are having a good time.
You got all the medallions. You're the hero that was foretold. Everything is going fucking stellar. He's laughing, right? And then you're like, well, that's probably less than ideal.
He's just really proud of me.
Yeah.
He knows what work I put in. Of course he does.
You wake up and you get some bad news. You're like, okay, I'm sure this old man's old, probably a little senile. He's probably exaggerating. You walk out. The town is in shambles. There's zombies. They're undead in the streets.
They latch onto your face.
Yeah. And they scream and you freeze.
Yes.
The whole world is fucked. And you're like, oh, and this is, midway through? No, it's like, I don't know, a third. Yeah.
And the first thing you see when you step out is, like, it's dark. The things in shambles. Even before you step into the market square, you just see the Temple of Time. Everything's dark. Death Mountain's on fire.
There's no music in the town.
Music's gone. People are gone. So, like, just that moment in and of itself. And again, it's preceded by this really cool cutscene of, like, opening the door of time to see the Master Sword, that tranquil setting, the light shining in on it. Again, that's not the first time with the Master Sword. Link to the Past has a cool moment with it, but everything felt like this build, and they snatched the rug out from underneath you in the best way possible.
You almost start from square one in some ways, and then you're off and you're fighting Phantom Ganon and saving the Garuda, the stone people, the Gorons. Gorons. Saving the Gorons. They've been captured. So that's like a unique theme. That's another thing I love is, like, each dungeon kind of has a theme. And the fire dungeon, the theme is fire, but also, like, all the Gorons are captured. So you're, like, freeing them too. It's, like, so creative. I love the bosses. I love the equipment. Perfect amount of everything.
And I mean, we said revolutionary. This one, the Z targeting, holy shit. Like, the fact of you played through the original Legend of Zelda, you played through Link to the Past, and you had you're going to stick my sword out on my 2D thing, and I'm going to poke him, basically. Yeah. Well, this is now 3D, so now you got to figure out, how am I going to poke him with my sword? Well, I've got something now that I can lock onto it. I can choose what I'm locking to. Oh, I've got multiple enemies. I've got to switch between what I'm going to attack. I can jump around him. Oh, Link can backflip. He can jump side to side. He can. So much comes out of just, like, a seemingly really difficult a barrier to overcome, to be an intuitive, easy battle system.
Yeah, these days it's probably overly simplistic, but I felt like such a badass. Yeah. I love the move backflip into a forward leaping thrust.
And you could side hop into it. You could do all sorts of stuff. Some of it was needed, especially for, like, some of the tougher enemies, like the Stalfoses. Like, it was necessary, and it's like, it is such a simple thing to describe, especially now. Back then, I would love to know what the design process was like. The iterations they had to go through to be like, okay, we're in a 3D space. We're going to have combat. We succeeded with, like, Mario 64. That was a couple years ago, so we know we can do 3D stuff. But now we're fighting things directly. This isn't Mario throwing punches at Goombas. It doesn't really matter. This is, like, honed combat in a series that's known for its sword play, right? And again, just like a Chrono Trigger or Mario 64, they nailed it on the first try. And if they hadn't, who knows where Nintendo is now? I'm not saying they'd be under. They had so many other things going for them, but, like, they revolutionized 3D gaming by bringing out Mario 64 and then honed it even further with this game in a way that was remarkable for its time.
And it applied to all of the equipment too. Firing the bow was very satisfying. The hook shot in a 3D space, so much fun. Favorite equipment, and it's because of that game. The bombs even were fun, and they worked still pretty well, even though you're in 3D space and it's not quite as simple. And I could go on and on. Like they applied the same care to every piece of equipment, and we haven't even touched on the like sort of meta approach to the great music. Like the music's very good, but it plays an integral role into the game where you're actually playing the songs.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna point out the music. Like it's a theme, it seems, in our top 5 that music is so extremely important to a good game. Like a good game has to have its own gameplay, but the music pushes it over the top into that upper double platinum tier, whatever it is. Because I will still, to this day, the Gerudo Valley theme with that Spanish guitar, mwah, I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
The beginning of the game, hearing this do 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 in this happy little village, nothing's wrong. So you're playing this happy little music. The no music when you come out of the temple of the time. Whew, what a bombshell!
Yeah.
It fits the mood so well in everything you do.
And like it was a perfect balance of pieces of heart, like secrets that you're finding. I can tell you where so many of those things are located now too, because it was so well done. And unlike Twilight Princess, where they're like, we're going to do 5 pieces, and it was like too much. It was too much. And this was like perfect amount. I loved it. And how creative you could be, like using the lens of truth to give you the answers to the chess game. It's like, it's so smart. It's such a smart game.
If we're going to look for foibles.
I was wondering, what's our cons? Like, we have
Navi, to this day, still horrible, grating, annoying, understandable for what it's meant to do from a game design perspective to kind of help the player through it. But still, even with Fee, the worst representation of a helping hand in this series. Because it's frustrating because Majora's Mask comes right after this, and Tattle and Tail are actually like interesting. So it was possible. They just didn't do it here. I will be honest. Sean mentioned he would replay all the dungeons. The thought of playing the intro from a gameplay perspective and listening to the great Deku Tree talk for about 9.5 hours is a little daunting for me. I love what it represents, and the first time it was super great, but I've played the beginning of this game so often now that I'm like, ugh. I guess that's true of Wind Waker as well. As much as I like the Forsaken Fortress, I'm not eager to get through that part of the game again. We're quibbling, but I mean, that's the stuff that comes to mind as far as like, if I was going to rate it less than a 10 out of 10, which I'm not, that's the stuff I would point to.
It's like using so we talked about the physics in Breath of the Wild. I'm using, when I like, at the time, I was like, there's no way they programmed in, if I stick this thing on, if I put fire on my stick, and then I take the stick to this web, they will burn the web. There's no way a game can do that. And then it did. And I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. But you haven't seen a lot of that before this game. Like, that's what I think people maybe forget. I
want to say it was just my nostalgia coming back of, I want to say it was 2000, 2001. Young Chris Etling comes over to David's house with a N64 and said, David, you're playing this game. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm playing this game? No, you're playing this fucking game. I'm going to plug it into your TV and I'm going to help you through it. And we spent weekends just basically where we'd stay the night at my house and be, all right, we're playing through this game. And like, that's how I experienced this game.
This is why I'm convinced you are okay with medieval stuff. It's just so much medieval stuff that you've done has been middling. So now you're like, oh, I hate medieval stuff. If it's done right, it's fine. It's still good. And this is a great example.
Absolutely. It is.
But this is the difference between us, is that Sean gives really heartfelt recommendations to Dave, and I give heartfelt mandates.
Yeah, sure.
I'm like, you're playing this game. It's what's best for you. Just trust me on this.
Yeah.
And especially because at the time my gameplay consisted of Madden 99, and like I love sports games so much back then. And
I did too. Like, no. They were a lot of fun. I have a ton of I poured tons of hours into like NFL Blitz on the N64 and like other games around that time. NBA Jam on the Super Nintendo. I love sports games, but they're not masterpieces. And it's nice that I can look back and be like, all right, so I made him play Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, and Chrono Trigger. Those are like the 3 standouts. That track record's pretty good.
Yeah. Man, and what I love is when a game has a story moment that really stands out. I think I love it even more when there's a gameplay moment that super stands out. And the example when you put on the iron boots and you sink all the way to the bottom of that lake and you realize like, oh, there's depth to this. And there's a thing at the bottom that like blew my mind.
Yeah.
Even like escaping Lon Lon Ranch with Epona sticks out in my head, being like, oh, you're an asshole. I'm just jumping over this fence.
Yep.
See you later. And you actually get to do it. And granted, you just run to the end of the cutscene. But like being able to actually exert that influence over the world just feels good. It's the same thing that Persona 5 does over and over again, where it's like you feel cool and powerful. And some games I think have lost sight of that, where it's like, well, we want you to have to kind of be middling for a while. It's like, you can do that, but give me moments where I feel heroic. It's a fucking video game.
I love the fight on the boat in the Shadow Temple, where you do the fight and then you have to escape the boat.
Yeah, where it sinks and you
I was
die.
like, oh my god. Good thing I got off this boat.
I gotta play this game again.
The Spirit Temple and the young Link, adult Link split coming back into play in a dungeon.
Yep.
So you have to come back here as a kid. You have to first of all make your way through this fucking desert, which is not terrible in a gameplay. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it feels bad because it's meant to feel bad. It's a desert. You're supposed to get lost. And then you make it as a kid. You can do certain things. You have to come back as an adult. I think, is the Zelda Sheik twist predictable? Sure, probably
loved it
much in the same way that like the Zelda Tetra one. You're like, I mean, that's probably just Zelda, but you know, both of them still really cool to see in execution. You know, Sheik jamming along with you with a harp when she learn how to play it. We're not going to worry about that. Like all these things, like everything.
I don't think I knew, for the record, and maybe I'm dumb, but I did not just assume Sheik was Zelda. Now, part of that is because we've now changed physiology as well.
Yes, with magic.
That's cheating a little bit, but it threw me off the scent. So I was like, well, it can't be Zelda. That guy's jacked. And I can see his pecs.
And to be clear, I wasn't like, I was just smart. I didn't think of it till near the very end. After
where
the
you're
Spirit
like,
Temple,
I haven't seen Zelda in a while.
What is happening with her and who is this person? Because there weren't supposed to be many Sheikah left. Like I thought, you know, like Zelda's guardian, like Impa was supposed to be the like what happened with the I see.
Yeah.
But still, again, I'm not trying to be like I was so smart, but it was just like whether you thought that was a twist or not, like it was still really well done. Even if you saw it coming, you're like, this is super cool that she's basically been doing like this guerrilla tactics for 7 years. And now is helping you get to the end, and she got kidnapped in a crystal. That kind of sucks, but fine. It's what's expected.
I think the bosses are really creative. I love the dragon that is oppressing the Gorons. I love the drum guy, Bongo, where he's like terrorizing Kakariko Village, like as an invisible force.
And a fun fight because you have to figure out how to like shoot him with an arrow where you're getting jumped up and down over and over again on a fucking giant bongo drum.
Twin Rova, the people who like raised Ganon. Like, that's huge, and it's a pretty fun fight, too.
Quirky riches, and then they fuse, and that becomes neat mirror shield mechanic.
No,
it's not a bad boss fight in the game.
No shield has ever been cooler than the mirror shield.
Yeah.
So, there's that. It's like, man, everything about this game. I love it. I love all of it. Slingshot. Here's a quibble. Slingshot. Useless.
I don't know how to use it as an adult. What am I supposed to do? Pull it back? What the fuck?
You get it, and
my hands are too big.
Yeah.
Magic beans. I can't plant these. Now, granted, you can't in the future because it's all dead. I know, but I mean, little quibbles, like you said, that's a little bit weird. The equipment. It is kind of neat, like you said, because when you're first starting out, now that your equipment's basically screwed, you do have to kind of resurface everything as an adult to make that work. So I like it to that extent, but it is a little silly at times.
Do we really need Ganon playing the organ as I get closer?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. But no.
Is it just evil for the sake of being evil? Yeah, that's why it's great.
Also true.
I love that place. Great final dungeon, too. Like, kind of incorporating all these different pieces from what you've done to the...
And both forms are great boss fights.
It's just a masterpiece. It's our number one, so of course it is, but I love this game.
I think that we talked it to death. Good. What was your favorite Zelda? I think, Chris, you said Wind Waker is your favorite Zelda. I think for me, it became Breath of the Wild. But Sean, is this your favorite Zelda?
By far. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's
his number one.
Yeah, it's my
number one game
vote
on his list. So
yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. No, I don't think any of us are wrong in any instance. It is insane how this series, just about every single time it has an iteration, it's like, God damn it, this is so good. It's insane.
Yeah.
How consistently good it is. When Twilight Princess is your worst.
There's like no bad Zelda games post 1988. Like, okay, Wand of Gamelon, fucking terrific.
We're not gonna count that.
Does that even count? Yes, there are some middling ones. You know, like Spirit Tracks is like,
yeah, but I still liked it.
But if the worst games in your series are like C+s, and you've had this many games over this many years, That's why I have no qualms with there being 4 in the top 25, and I guess effectively 4 in the top 14.
The different tunics, so cool. It was the first game that, well, maybe that's not true, but in 3D it looked very cool.
Well, Link to the Past had different tunics, but they just reduced damage. They didn't have any function beyond that.
Did you equip him in different tunics just for the sake of it?
For like color schemes?
Yes.
Yeah, I wore the red one all the time.
Yeah, me too.
The fire one was it.
And I wanted to wear the blue one more often. I thought he looked cool in the blue one, but then it took more damage from fire or whatever it was. Like something bad happened when you get hit by fire in that, I think. So
all I know is my memories is not adult Link wearing a green tunic. It is adult Link wearing a red tunic.
Me
That
too.
is it.
Yeah, red. That's it. As soon as I got it. Yep.
I don't know why. It just is.
It fits.
Wasn't there a game where you had a purple tunic? Somewhere, at some point, you had a purple tunic.
Well, Fierce Deity Link's like light purple, isn't he?
Oh, that was very cool. Fierce Deity Link was very cool. Although Majora's Mask Final Fight, so much more fun as not Fierce Deity Link, but we're
100%.
getting off topic.
I hated using that in that fight.
Yeah.
It was meant to be more fun than that.
Yeah.
Fierce Deity Link is light blue. I'm fucking tripping.
The Helix Sword, though.
Well, the problem is, in my head, I think of, so we played that Ocarina of Time multiplayer one, and so you can be different colored links.
Yeah.
So I was a black tunic, because, I'm a tryhard. So I thought that was neat. So there was like a lavender one in that one, but that doesn't count.
Just like the Ocarina being like this thing that you can play, but you have to learn the song. And tons of people, like, they just made their own music.
You change time of day.
Yeah.
You can change the time of day. You can make it rain. Sounds like basic now, but
mind-blowing. Yeah.
it had puzzle impacts and like world-affecting impacts. Look, we could talk about this game for another hour and a half as well, but I think it's a deserving number one. It had the most votes of anything. It seems like the correct choice. It's one that we had. Again, you can see it on the screen. Number one then. Stayed in place now. Probably stays there in another 10 years. If it doesn't, that means something exceptional has happened.
This is what we'll do in 10 years. We do this again, but in the top 5, it gets its own episode. There you go.
We're going to blow out the third quarter of the year and just...
I can't imagine... in 2012, I wouldn't have said, man, are we going to do this in 2022? I don't know that I can imagine doing this in 2032, but...
Yeah, but to that point, at this, I'm kind of like, why? We've done it for so long. What would be the barrier? Even if we move, it's like, okay, I mean, we just do it. We don't have to be in the same spot and do it. We've done that before. We started the show like that.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's like, there's no barrier. I don't know. I think we're just going to do it as long as we're enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't have thought we would do this 10 years later then.
Yeah.
So I don't know why Dave's echoing, by the way. It's fine. We're almost done. Long episode. Real quick, anything that sticks out as far as too high, too low? We kind of talked about some of them on the way.
All my beef was front loaded, so now, and there was less beef as it went on. So like this top 5, I think Witcher probably should have been in there somewhere. But yeah, I mean, again, I was very pleased. There's nothing. I think you said it, Chris. Like Persona 5, I don't know if it would have felt quite right for me to be our overall all-time greatest game.
I had no shame in it being 2.
Yeah, but 2 is like perfect.
If I'm trying to think of a game that didn't make it into the top 25, I think Metroid Prime is the one that sticks out to me. Again, people's mileage may vary on that one. I'm sure y'all would have liked Final Fantasy IX to have made it. It just missed. But for me, if I'm thinking like best games ever, I feel like Prime should be in our top 25. It wasn't the last time, and it isn't this time. But that's quibbling. If it's 25th, does it really change anything from it being 29th? Not really.
I think overall, no Metal Gear Solid, that's a big hit. Overall, the list is much stronger though, from 1 to 50.
My only quibble, I think, and probably this reflected in my voting, is I had a lot more older type, Tetris, Mario, like those not making the top 25 is difficult. I understand the reason that they don't, because of clearly there are better games that have come out, but what they meant something to me in that sense.
Yeah, and next time we can explore. I don't know that we'd want to do this, but we could talk about creating a rubric where like there are certain things and where we have like impact. And if that's a thing that we all have to consider, it probably jumps something like that up. But we didn't do that. And I think it worked out because it's fun because we flip-flopped. Sometimes we went for impact. Sometimes we went for like Persona 5 where this is just a culmination of everything. And it's great.
Yep. And my only beef really is that Red Dead 2 didn't make the top 25. It was on 26, and I love that game. So I love
probably
that story.
should be, yeah.
It's my fault. Point the finger at me.
Damn it, Chris. But it's interesting how much subjectiveness and objectiveness goes into a list like this, and how you try to be objective, but also when you sit back and you think of like what moments gave me goosebumps, what moments stood out to me, what moments do I still think about to this day.
Yeah.
Is there?
Yeah, nostalgia is, definitely a factor, but I also think like nostalgia is there for a reason. Like you're not nostalgic about things that suck.
Mhm.
You're nostalgic about things that meant something to you, and to mean something that had to be of quality. So I think it's a good balance.
So what's next? Well, next week, as we talked about in the lead up to this, we'll be doing our best of 2022 because it's the first episode of 2023. That's the annual tradition.
I'm so ready for that.
I
think
too.
I might have a top 10 in everything.
I struggle to have a top 5 of games, but I'll talk about why when we get there.
Yeah. I'm
I
ready
have
for
my
this year.
top.
I'm so stoked. I'm going to run over your list. I'm going to run over your list. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait.
I have my top 5 of TV already set. We're
Great.
good.
I have my list done as well. I kind of did it on the side a few weeks ago because I wanted to make sure it was ready to go, and then I tweaked it once with something that came out late, and then that was about it.
I would really like to try to play Midnight Suns. I don't know if it's going to happen before that date, but I'm going to try.
Are you going to watch the entire TV show that I've recommended multiple times before next week?
He will not.
No, it's next, but I have to make. So I finished Andor. I am making and I finished Game of Thrones. I'm making my way through Better Call Saul. And then it's probably, I think at that point, it's probably time for whatever that show is called. I forget.
The
Orville.
Just
The Orville.
text me when you need help.
Yeah.
Whatever his name is. After that, of course, we'll have to get back to some regular episodes. I have a trivia night ready to go. Well, not quite. I have to finish the opening and ending round, but the 4 games are ready to go for that. So we'll get back to that in January. And then, of course, we'll have to talk about the Suns at some point or another again. That's inevitable. But big project, I have 2 thoughts, and we're going to leave with this. 1, we did Best Video Game Series in April 2017. So it's been almost 6 years, not a clean decade like it was for this. I actually thought it was earlier than that. I thought we did that in like 2015, but nope, I looked it up, 2017.
And I don't think I took part in that one.
God, I would have thought you would have at least like voted on it, but
maybe I threw in some votes, but I know I didn't really take part in like writing anything or anything like that. That was a weird time in life.
yes. So I think like we had some other people contribute to the writing, including Michelle at the time. Remember Michelle?
I don't
know.
I do not actually.
And actually, I don't think Sean wrote anything for it either because at that point he had abandoned writing for the site. So
What was it? Best series?
Best series, yep.
Now, best series.
The problem with that is we know what number 1 is. It has not changed. It was that then, and it will be that again based on how our individual games came out. But there is a potential for a lot of other things to have moved around. Like at the time, Mass Effect was pretty high. It actually could have been higher pre-Andromeda, but now post-Andromeda it's probably taken a hit. We mentioned God of War rising up the ranks. Like, could be interesting to do again, or we could do a brand new one.
What are some ideas?
Akin to what Dave said at the top of this very episode, and I just mentioned here a moment ago, we never did video game moments.
Oh, yeah.
And that could be an interesting one. We'd have to kind of define what a moment is, but I don't think it's all that hard to define. And then, there's all sorts of interesting stuff you think about, even in some games that maybe overall weren't very good, that had individual things that they did quite well that you could then give some attention to.
I am game for that. That would be really tough because best games of all time, you can look up, you can do some homework. Best moments, a little bit harder to do homework, and we are going to run into a thing if someone's going to vote something and be like, oh my God, you're right. And you just forgot. But I think that'll be kind of a fun part of the process too.
And we can always lean towards that being more of a favorite list and not just we're trying to be more objective than normal like we did for this one where it's like, all right, consider the long-term impact.
I agree.
It kind of has to also because how do you objectively rank how something resonated with you?
Yeah.
So to me, there's less danger of like, but we could also always try and compare notes too where it's like, hey, what's your list look like? Oh, you have that on there. Oh shit, I didn't even think about that. So we can always see how it goes, but we'll see. We'll talk about that off air. It'll be a few weeks before we even considered it, maybe even months, because this is a big undertaking. I hope you enjoyed it. We had quite a bit of fun doing it. It's work up front, but now it meant that we had stuff recorded for the entire month of December. And, this is some of our best stuff, I think, when we have a chance to kind of go through this. We take the time, we rank them all. It's done empirically, and then we get to talk about our favorites. So I enjoyed it quite a bit.
So did I. Dave didn't. Dave, he's silent.
No,
he actually kind of hated all of it.
No, it was terrible. I hated every moment of it.
Yeah.
No,
Dave doesn't actually like gaming, so it's really we
That's
probably
right.
shouldn't have asked him to
No,
vote or even
you
be on
didn't
the
hear
show.
my giddiness, and you didn't hear my giddiness in the best moments. No,
No,
I
he
hate it.
didn't enjoy the praise that you heaped upon him either. He
Yeah.
hated that, actually.
Yeah.
Actually,
I say best
you know,
moments. I think eventually best series. Let's do both.
We might as well just wait for the 10-year anniversary of Best Series, maybe. We'll
But
see.
I mean, to
Yeah.
be fair, I'm already researching best.
I'm
moments,
already
so-
thinking of best moments. Yeah, I think I have my number one, but which I'm
I-
actually happy about.
I had already been toying with it before we recorded this batch, which was this week's show and last week's. But hearing us mention all those in succession, I was like, that's a list we haven't done that I think would be really good.
It might be kind of basic to say because I think this probably applies to all things. But when you say best moments, I'm like, that's this is a better format for that. Talking about it is a fun way to go about best moments.
Yep.
Whereas we could have spent an hour on any individual game in the top 20 of
Yeah.
our list,
Oh, easily.
and that would have been fine. We have done that on a few of them because they've been reviewed in individual episodes because they came out over the course of our show. But that one I think is a little bit more concise because you can talk about individual moments and not have to talk about the whole breadth of a game and its long-term evolution of a series and whatever. You know,
Dave, eventually we're gonna have to review God of War 2.
Yep. Sometime I gotta get it and play through it. It's
Oh, yeah.
I'll do my best on that.
and eventually we'll have to do a Pokemon review.
Oh yeah,
So there's a lot
Yeah.
on deck for January that we're all gonna have to fit in somehow, but it's a great problem to have. We're teaming with content that we're excited to share with everybody. Oh
Yeah.
no.
yep.
Instead of it being like, let's do a Reddit questionnaire. Like, I don't dislike those episodes. They can be fun in their own way, but we're at our best when we're super invested too.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming along with us on this journey. Happy New Year because it's over in 4 days, and we'll come back next Tuesday with a live episode. I hope you'll join us for it because we want to hear from you as well what your favorite media was of 2022. We'll be back with that show and plenty more in January and the year to come. As always, in between episodes, you can find us at our website, objectionnetwork.com or youtube.com/objectionnetwork, where hopefully you watch this whole series because, I mean, it looked cool. Look at the thing on the side. That was neat. Thanks. I'll pat myself on the back. See you in 2023.